Live. I was muted. So I'll try that again, Jocelyn. I was saying good morning. Welcome to Solidarity Live. It's been a while, hence why I left my microphone on mute, although I think I do that all the time anyways. It's 2022, although to be honest, 2022's gotten off to a real 2021 start. You know, it's got a big 2021 energy to it that I wish it didn't. But I'm really excited for the show today, Jocelyn. How about you?
Oh, I'm ecstatic, completely ecstatic. We're actually here with David Sirota, founder, editor of the Daily Poster, and producer, genius, writer, inspirer of the most watched show on Netflix right now, Don't Look Up, or movie, I guess. But hi, David. Good morning.
Hey there. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
First of all, if you can't tell, I'm a huge fan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I don't really even know where to start. We've been getting questions from people on the internet who they range very widely, from the very profound to the why were the snacks charged for. So
That's the most profound question in the movie.
There's a lot of Easter eggs in the movie. A lot of Easter eggs.
So my theory is it was a power move. Is that correct?
I don't like to interpret the movie for others. I sort of think, art is supposed to make people think, but I do think that the humor in that, at least, I put it this way, the reason I think it's funny, and other people can think it's funny for different reasons, is because, one, I think it exemplifies kind of the interpersonal pettiness that can exist even at the highest reaches of power. And of course, pettiness to the point where there's not even really a reason to be petty. There's no actual larger goal other than to just kind of be an asshole. And so having been in situations not exactly like that, but having been in and around politics long enough to know that kind of little petty nonsense goes on, I thought it was particularly hilarious. And I also saw somebody, which I don't think I had thought of, but somebody said, it was really funny that it was somebody in the Pentagon, a place that's notable for kind of profligate waste and kind of abuse. And if you look at this movie as a satire with different archetypes, the fact that it was the general who did this, I think is pretty hilarious.
And also that my favorite part of that bit is that she can't get over it.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Even
Yes.
with all the rest of everything, when it comes back to her, she's like, but why did he do? And to just say, it really felt like, I'm like, oh, I can recognize that from DC a lot, where like something's going on and from outside people are like, ooh, there must be some deep ideological reasons for like this thing. And you're like, no, that dude's just pissed that he didn't speak before the other guy. And now, and that
here's a truism.
Yeah.
People ultimately are all just people.
Yep.
And I think she has trouble believing a general would behave like that, because I think Cate, the character, is the eyes for the audience, the sort of quote unquote regular person. And she can't believe that a person essentially at that level of power is just behaving like just a regular run-of-the-mill jerk. And you know what? You realize, you've been in politics and media, wherever, that ultimately people are just people.
Well, and so that's I was so just, Alex knows I'm a big fan of novels and great fiction, and the movie felt like a great novel to me. It was just so artistic in the way it approached this thing that we're all sort of saturated in, the climate crisis. So what was your process like for writing this and coming up with it?
Sure. I mean, the process was basically, look, I've known Adam McKay for many, many years, going back to his Anchorman days. And by the way, he got in touch with me originally, if I remember correctly. I had written something fairly esoteric about NAFTA. And he had read it and he got in touch with me. And I remember being like, who's Adam McKay? And, I looked up he's that Saturday Night Live guy. I was like, why is the Saturday Night Live guy that interested in like NAFTA. Like I'm glad he was, but it was like kind of, that's not typically who reaches out on a piece about NAFTA. And so the point in telling that story is that he has deeply seated politics, right? I mean, he follows this stuff at the level that we do, that really people who really care follow politics. Politics to him, political engagement is not a hobby. And so many years later, it was after he did the movie Vice, we were talking about, I said to him, listen, you have to use your superpowers for something about the climate crisis. And he basically said, I know I do. I just haven't been able to figure out what. I don't want to do kind of a post-apocalyptic Mad Max thing. And I don't know I'm not sure how to go about this. And, we talk often. And at one point I had said, we were lamenting the media coverage and how little the political leaders seem to care about climate change. I said, it really does feel like an asteroid's headed towards Earth and nobody cares. And he said, maybe there's a nugget of an idea there. And so we started kind of going back and forth on different scenes you could put in there, and how the president would react, and who would try to profit off of it, and how the political and media establishment would react to these revelations. And he then went to work after we kind of came up with this idea that it would be about scientists trying to navigate the modern political and media world. He went to work with all this mess of ideas that we were going back and forth on. And he put together an amazing script. I gave him notes. It was, a bunch of drafts that I was giving him notes on, and getting notes from others. And ultimately out came the script. And I think the script is fantastic. And then him as director, getting some of those characters to improv and riff off the script, I think was even more incredible. Unfortunately, I wasn't on set, even though they asked me to, they said, you're welcome to come out on set. We'd love you to be here. But the problem was they filmed it in the middle of winter in 2020 over into 2021, pre-vaccine, when COVID was the worst. And they basically said, you have to come out, but you have to essentially quarantine for 2 weeks. And so my wife was like, listen, the kids are at home. I'm in the legislature. Our dog was on his last, and he was about to pass. And it was like, there's no way, and it's not safe. Or if it is safe, it's like, it's really kind of dicey. It was like, yeah, there's no way you're going out to that. So I missed it. But the point is, all that's a long story to say, is that based on top of the script, there was incredible improvising from some of the amazing actors that you see in there. I mean, Jonah Hill, just coming up with riff after riff after riff. I mean, that stuff is just gold in this movie.
I mean, gold, because satire, it's protected speech for a reason. Like, it's actually not just a movie that you made. It's very important that it's satire. Right. And satire is incredibly uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable. It should make everyone uncomfortable. It just kind of like, that's what it feels like, right? Right there. But then, I mean,
it's interesting. There's really not a ton of movie satire in America as much anymore. I mean, I'm not that deep into the pop culture in America, but just to my mind, I don't, I mean, there's the Iannucci masterpieces, right. In the Loop, which is probably in my view, In the Loop is the greatest representation of Washington that's maybe ever been put
on the thick of it is the best political satire, right? I mean, like,
unbelievable.
The Don't Look Up is not derivative of anything. Like, the thing that I was going to give a shout out to satire, that's a little like highfalutin, but it's not derivative. It's when it's done well, you're actually grasping something that's like literally as old as writing, as storytelling. Yes. It's lifting up power and being like, do you see how ridiculous this is? And it's a deeply uncomfortable thing for people, but you're like, oh, but here, laugh. And you're like, oh, thank God, because otherwise it was going to be too much. And that, David, is, I think, I mean, like, the balance to pull that off, just sheer brilliance, and the ensemble cast of like genius.
Thank you.
Obviously,
What I'm really proud about the movie, among other things, I mean, there's two things I'm proud about. One, the execution. I'm proud of all of it, but one, the execution, and two, the effect. I'm proud of the execution in the sense that I don't think, in my view, that we took the easy road or let anybody off. I don't want to give away spoilers, but I think when you watch this,
we had that discussion. I think we have to just talk about spoilers.
Sure.
So
Okay. Fine.
Spoiler alerted.
Sure.
In the text.
So I don't think we let anybody off in the sense of this movie does not villainize and say regular people are stupid. It says regular workaday people, non-elites, are actually quite smart, get it, understand that they're being manipulated and duped. There are various scenes where that is shown, where the folks in the restaurant say, "Listen, we feel like we're being lied to. Tell us the truth." There's a scene at the presidential rally where one of the people in the rally looks up and says, "I think you've been lying to us." The scientists are non-elites, the people who are trying to blow the whistle, and so the execution is aimed at institutions and elites, and it doesn't let those institutions and elites off. It raises questions about political power. It raises questions about donor power, about technological triumphalism, and of course, the comet ends up hitting the planet, and it doesn't let the audience off and tie it up into a nice bow and say, "Hey, everything's going to be fine if we all just sit back." And that, to me, I think that was a relatively risky choice because it doesn't let the audience off. And just to say, I particularly, my own personal taste, I like when cultural products don't let the audience off. I mean, I was one of the, as an example, I was a huge fan of the way The Sopranos ended. Like some people were like, "Oh my God, I didn't like it. It went to black. I thought my TV broke." I was like, that is so great. It's so great that you didn't let me off. Like I have to sit there and think about it. And what was it? And I mean, that to me, that's what I liked. And so not to give away too much about the process, but there at times there were some questions. Oh, are we really going to have the asteroid hit the Earth? And I was very much in the look. You got to go for it. I mean, you can't let the audience off the hook. And to his credit, Adam was in that camp, and I think there was just a little bit of concern, like is that going to be too jarring? And I think it really worked. Now, the second thing I'm really proud of is the fact that the movie, I don't think this is just I would like to believe. I think it actually has done this. I think it has emboldened and boosted and made climate scientists, activists, climate scientists, climate activists, not just climate folks. It has made, I hope, lots of people who want a change, who work for change, feel seen, feel recognized, feel like they're not alone. And I think that's one of the things that this movie, I think it's gotten such a huge reaction, is that it confirms a lot of the things that we all know, but aren't things that aren't very much talked about, and that elites and institutions don't want us to talk about. And so the response has been kind of a release, like see, I'm not alone. Other people see what the absurdity and are outraged by the absurdity of what I see, I know is going on, but that the elites and the sort of corporatized, commodified information system doesn't want us to talk about. And so I think to see climate scientists and movement activists say that and use the movie for the movements to save our world. I mean, that's it. Like in a sense, that's the whole point. Like the rest is just icing on the cake. That's what it's supposed to do.
Well, and it felt so. I've been writing about this a lot this week. I just really want to thank you. It felt so cathartic for me, and I think a lot of people my age. When I first started reading about climate crisis, I was in middle school. Yeah. And watching that movie really mirrored the emotions I think a lot of young people, young activists have. Avaz published a peer-reviewed study in The Lancet about the fact that 18 to 25-year-olds are having significant mental health disturbances
Yeah.
because they're imbibing this information, and they look at their governing body and they see in action, they see what should be an absurd, ridiculous SNL skit, but is actually our governing body. And when I look at this movie, it's like, it's just such a beautiful example to me of how activism and art can create something that really is empowering for people. And again, I just want to thank you, because you're right. Like, this isn't something that's like taking a shot at, you know, the caricature of the middle American Trump supporter
No.
that the mainstream media loves to trot out, which I think is largely a fiction, but whatever. And instead, it's something that just the conversations around it have been incredibly empowering for people who are doing the good work. What, you know, for you, like, you are an incredible journalist, incredible, been politically involved in a lot of different ways. What would your dream for the activism from this movie be?
Look, you know, I mean, in terms of specific policies, I mean, I made this point before to Eric Holthouse, the great climate writer, that look, first of all, it's an allegory, right? I mean, it's a metaphor. I've seen some of the commentary around the movie. Oh, you know, the metaphor isn't perfect, and you know, oh, you know, the comet isn't a perfect metaphor for climate. Yeah, I mean, that's to me, in my view, that's kind of like saying the David and Goliath allegory is not a perfect metaphor for the specific details of hand-to-hand combat. I mean, like that, it doesn't. Like, fine, you're right. A comet is not actually climate change. Great point. Like, I concede that.
Very
right?
insightful.
Yeah, great. But I also said to Eric, we're not prescribing specific policy. I mean, I know the climate policies. I can give you my list of things that I want to see happen on climate change. But just vis-a-vis the movie, I think, has a respect for the idea that first and foremost, we have to break through denial. That's the first stage of the problem. And that movements, small d democratic movements, the movements themselves have to choose the tactics and the policy prescriptions to succeed. It's not for, at least it's not for this movie to say, hey, we need X, Y, Z, you know, A, B, C. A movie's, or this movie's, I think, role is to try to wake up as much as possible the broadest number, largest number of people possible to the idea that, hey, we really gotta do something. And I've heard some, I think it was McKay, talk about when it comes to climate, that there's a denialist set, which is probably the hardest to reach. And then there's a climate activism set, which already gets that we have to act. And then there's a large number of people, I wouldn't call them in the middle, but sort of in the middle of that spectrum, that know that climate change is happening, know that it's problematic, but may not sense the urgency and or the possibility of warding off the worst parts of it. So either a mix of kind of defeatism, yeah, I know it's bad, but there's nothing we can do, or yeah, I know it's bad, but look, it's, you know, it's 50 to 100 years in the future. So that set of people, a large set of people, I think are activatable. I have hope for that set of people to feel more urgency, to feel that it's possible to fix this problem, to see a movie like this and walk away from it saying, hey, listen, this movie is not prophecy or destiny. It's cautionary. And there's a line in the movie that actually hasn't gotten a ton of attention, which to me is one of the most important lines. It's where in Leonardo DiCaprio's sort of network-esque rant on TV, where he kind of breaks down, he says, we could have stopped it. And to me, that is such an important line. And that actually, if you do use the metaphor, you know, take it, draw it all the way out, they could have stopped it when it was far away. They had the technology to do it. They could have relatively easily stopped it, and they didn't. And that's his lament. And that's actually the point when it comes to climate change. The earlier we act, the easier it is to actually mitigate the worst effects. I've heard somebody use a ski mountain as a slope as a metaphor for this. That, you know, if we had started dealing with climate change 20 years ago, the mountain, in terms of what we had to do, you know, reduce energy this much, looked like kind of a green circle or a blue square. I'm from Colorado, I ski, right? So like a relatively easy hill to, like, you know, go up. Now it's looking a little bit more like a black diamond because we've waited. And the longer we wait, the more steep that hill becomes. And so to me, that line from DiCaprio, we could have stopped it, essentially, had we acted early, is one of the messages here. Like, hey, we can stop the comet. Like, that's a great thing. Like, when you walk out of a movie, you're like, a sci-fi horror movie, you're like, thank God I don't live in that world, man. I mean, I think people walk out of this movie like, well, I think we are actually living in this world. But the movie, I think, postulates that we don't have to stay on that track. That does not have to be our reality if we decide to change things.
And here's where I get to ask my specific question, which I know is it's a vague one, but because satire, it's almost always the same answer, but it's who's the villain in this film. It's important, and I'll tell you what I think, and then you tell me. But I think it's super important that you said it's not people who have been conned, right? You have sympathy for people who have been conned, and none for the con man, none for the people in power who have led people to this way for profit. And so it's a systems issue, but the billionaire stands out as clearly the right. Why did the ships turn around? Because some human, a man, thinks that he's more than that. He actually calls himself Kronos at one point, right?
Right.
He predicts the future. He's like one of the best characters I've ever seen to put into to personify who we talk about on this show all the time. The billionaires. We don't have to let the comet crash into the earth.
Right.
We all win. There's only one small group of people who lose. It's these billionaires. They will never be on the same side as us. They think they can escape life and earth. They think that they can escape death. Very importantly, they think that they are magical, and they're not. They're just human, which is what satire, almost always the end of it all, is, right? The emperor wears no clothes. Those in power who you really, and there's a line in the movie, I can't remember exactly, but where they're like, I know you want to believe that the people in power are figuring it out, but they're not.
Right,
it's never up to them. It's only up to us. And that is what I hope opens up, that we can never, the billionaires are the villains, right? That class. They can't actually solve problems. Only we can solve problems.
That's right. And I think there's something about that character, which I think is really the reason why I think Mark Rylance is amazing actor.
Amazing.
I mean, just truly amazing. And in that role is just unbelievable.
He should win everything. Just my personal opinion.
Just so, I mean, he is just so incredible. But I think part of the reason that character resonates is because we see that authentically he does not see himself as a villain. That a lot of times in Hollywood productions, the villain is like Dr. Evil, which is why we laugh at Dr. Evil, because Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movies, Dr. Evil is self-aware of himself being evil and loves to be evil, which is hilarious. But actually, a lot of people we portray that we see as evil, they've convinced themselves they've created messianic narratives in their own internal monologue about themselves. And I think that when Peter Isherwell, this character that Rylance plays, is offended when Leonardo DiCaprio says to him, you know, I want you to be treating this like I want you to respect the science here. I don't want you to be treating this project like you're a businessman.
Are you calling me
Right?
a
And he
businessman?
genuinely
Yep.
feels aggrieved that the scientist sees him motivated as a businessman. Now he's the third richest human in the history of the world, which is so, but I think when we think about, you know, whatever billionaire you have in your mind, a lot of them have created a messianic narrative in their own minds about themselves, where they believe genuinely in the goodness of the horrible things that they're doing. And I think that then and I think some of that bleeds out into their followership, that their followership believes that they are messianic figures. And it's all a ruse. And if it's not a ruse, it's just wrong. That, as I said at the beginning of this, people are just people. Even billionaires are just people. They're distorted and whatever people, they're messed up, and you know, they're damaged, and they're pathologically, you know, they're sociopaths, but they're just people. And so I think part of the message of the movie is there is no man behind the curtain. There is no savior there for us. And I think that's an unsettling thing. And frankly, it was the feeling that I had on the election night of 2016, which is that there was this idea, I think, boiling in the background of American politics that, listen, Donald
Somebody's
Trump's
got it.
Yeah, so they got it. They're like, come on, it's not really going to happen. Like, you know, I mean, even the Clintons were like, yeah, Donald Trump should run because that could never, they never did, right?
Yes.
I mean, that was the whole thing. The Clintons literally said, you should look at running. I mean, that's part of our history. I know liberals don't like to talk about that, but that happened. And I think it was because, like, come on, that can't happen. And then on election night, to me, there was that feeling. And look, I'm obviously not a like Hillary Clinton, you know, huge fan of Hillary Clinton, to say the least. But the point is, I felt on election night when Donald Trump was elected, you know, I knew it sort of intellectually, but it was a deep feeling of not a realization, but a reminder that keep calm, nothing is under control. There's not one cabal of people in the back. I mean, there are dark forces, there are people pulling strings, but there's not one set of people who got it, who just are going to make sure we're all okay. That is, and I think that we want to believe that that's true, because it's terrifying to admit the reality that I mean, not to get existential about it, but we're all floating around. We're pieces of dust on a piece of dust, floating around in a giant universe of dust particles. Ultimately, nothing is under control. There is no one overarching set of people who just make sure we're all okay. We all have to actually participate in a day-to-day way and do our parts, because others are not going to save us.
Can I do, Jocelyn, just one quick follow-up on that, which is it's everything you just said. We have billionaires, but it's not like this is new, right? Like, look back at totalitarian autocracies, right? Like the whole of humanity, more time, if you look over history, has been spent where humans get a lot of comfort in offloading our purpose to others and being like, I don't know why I'm here. I know I'm going to die someday, but like, I don't want to think about that. And so we're like, that person is in charge, right? And then when there's crises is when it all cracks open and everyone's like, oh my God, Tsar Nicholas is a moron, right? And the world is on fire and everyone thought that there were smart people. And you're like, there's not. Cut open any institution and out comes people just like you and me. And the uncomfortableness, I think we should own it. We should live in it and realizes a pat phrase I always say, I think I stole it from Mike Papantonio actually, of just reminding ourselves the cavalry's not coming. There is no cavalry. We are the cavalry. We are the only ones who can actually not have the asteroid hit us, not have the comet hit us and destroy us, because we have to defeat the billionaires who are like, well, maybe it's a good thing. But it's the reason that satire, when it taps in, feels so old and powerful is because you can read Aristophanes, ancient Greek, and read about the exact same stuff with the Athenian War, right? Where he was satirizing people in power. And the whole thing is always to remind people that the emperor, the billionaire, the aristocrat, the president, the whoever is a human, just like you and I. Don't give them a special thing. Elon Musk doesn't have a special knowledge that none of us have. And in fact, and then I'll bring it back to your movie, I love this thing where it's like, can you please listen to the scientists? Like there's a process. And these are kind of the softest, sweetest people who look at this machine. And I also like feel I'm in the movie sometimes too, because I have to laugh at, I'm like, the only way to make change in this system is you do stuff, right? And I know I'm playing in this theater that goes on, and I'm trying to make change against the powerful, but then you have to find some humor in it too, because it's hilarious, especially the Ariana Grande concert part.
And I think the thing that's triggered some folks is the fact that we don't name a political party for the president, and I think that's also made some folks uncomfortable. Oh, you're saying both parties are the same, or you're saying that And first of all, again, it goes back to a fundamental point about art. Like, we want the viewer to bring to glean from it as much as they can through their own experience, as opposed to us saying to you got to believe this and this about your political views. I also think, but I also think that clearly, if you're being honest, there is a political class in this country that is transpartisan. A lot of and I've sort of said this as a kind of pushback, which is, listen, if you think President Orlean is Trump, you think President Orlean is Hillary Clinton, you think President Orlean is Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, whoever. We're not saying that. President Orlean is an entirely fictional character. Your decision about who you think the president is says a lot more about your perception and your choice of politicians to like or not like than it says about anything in the movie, which is fine. But I think that when we talk about sort of these deep civic religions, you want to believe, for instance, that there's somebody somebody else is going to take care of everything. One of the other civic religions is a religion of, I must worship my party, my leader, my politician, my favorite media person on television. That's who I worship. Whatever they say must be right. Whatever the other side says must be wrong. And that is an enormously problematic facet of our society, and especially for scientists who science is physics and math. It doesn't care about party. It doesn't care about which particular pundit on TV you like, or which your favorite senator. It doesn't care about any of that. And one of my laments in my own work as a journalist and just as a person in this country is that dynamic on both sides has gotten far worse, in my perception, in my lifetime. That is to say that the unquestioning worship of, for instance, Donald Trump by his hardcore supporters, the unquestioning worship of the Democratic Party, of Barack Obama, of Democratic Party leaders by what I call Team Blue liberals. Both of those are a problem. I happen to have more values agreement even with the sort of so-called team blue liberals. I have some more on specific values, but the problem is that values on both sides don't really, they come secondary. Values and facts come secondary to loyalty to the dear leaders. And that is an enormous problem. That is and it's got, as a journalist, I felt that in the sense of if I published a story in 2016, we published a bunch of investigative stories about money tied to Hillary Clinton. I was accused of being a disloyal, horrible Trump supporter, disloyal to the Democratic Party. We did a bunch of investigations on Trump. I was accused of being just a liberal Democratic water carrier. And what was disappointing about that is that when you do journalism, you want the facts to be judged on their merits. Like, listen, you may be a Democrat and you may not, but like if you don't like this story about money going to Hillary Clinton, be mad at Hillary Clinton, right? I'm here to report the fact. And imagine that then for climate scientists. They're here to tell us about what's going on with the livable ecosystem, and they're trying to say that in a political space where facts become cannon fodder in partisan wars, media wars, and culture wars, rather than us being able to stipulate the facts, and then the partisan media culture war being about what to do about the facts. Right? At least a debate about what to do about the facts stipulates the facts are the facts. And so my lament, one of the things I found most frustrating on both sides, and it's not to equate the values of both sides. I know where my own personal values are. It's not to say that both parties are exactly the same, but it is to say that this culture of worshiping the dear leader, of putting the politicians, the party apparatuses on a pedestal, is a deeply serious problem in this country right now on both sides.
I don't even know where to start because you both are saying so many things that I find inspiring and true. And just to add, David, like one thing that I think a lot about is, this whole bullying alone dynamic of where community spaces have broken down so significantly due to the extremities of wage stagnation and highly transit, that it's hard for me to not feel that as things like personal relationships and personal friendships are on the decline, people do engage in that exacerbation of offloaded purpose. Because like, if our lives are empty, it's way more easy to make your identity about a political candidate or even celebrity worship or these fatuous sort of empty obsessions that don't look up. It's so, the reason it's so funny and that because we're just like, we're drowning in it. And the digitized, like, oh, this celebrity, that celebrity, this candidate was caught sleeping with someone. And we're also distracted that, again, when you're that lonely, it's easy to be less critical.
Yes, and the pandemic has exacerbated it.
Yes.
And I would argue that social media, I mean, not to sound like an old Borscht Belt comedian, but it's like unsocial media, in the sense that social media connects you at a superficial way to people. And I think actually social media does a good job of keeping people. One thing social media does a good job of is keeping you actually in touch with and close to the people you already know offline, like your family, your friends, sharing photos and the like. But social media vis-a-vis people you've never met makes it easier for you to meet people. So that's good. But the downside is that it makes it easier for you to dehumanize people as well. That it's easier to demonize people from behind a screen, right? I mean, think about how our society would think about treating somebody the way, think about it like you go on Twitter and you see people, ragging on each other, dunking on each other. Like, for the most part, people don't do that, offline. Like
there'd be fights.
There'd be fights. That's like uncomfortable. It's like, oh, I see that. Okay, like you said something stupid, but like I see you're just like you're actually not a terrible person. Like you just kind of said something dumb, like, or you shot your mouth off or whatever, right? Like, and so I think social media has exacerbated this cult phenomenon that we're talking about,
yes,
which is I can dehumanize the other side anybody who disagrees with me, and my tribe, my politician, my cable TV host, my party, whatever it is, that gives me an entire belief system to know who's on my side and who isn't. And of course, the problem is that the politicians, the political apparatus, the media institutions, guess what? They don't want the us versus them to ever be based on. They never want it to be based on economic power, on political power. They want it to be based on culture, on identity, on things that don't threaten the actual power of this country, the actual financial and political power of this country.
So
Well,
what we
and
do,
you know, one of my favorite beliefs and like core psychological beliefs is that healthy relationships and healthy countries seek equality, you know, and it's what you're saying, David, like if we have this like celebrity worship, you know, dichotomy, it's much easier to focus on facts and the asteroid coming toward us. It's more easy to talk about like who's hot, who's not. And I guess my big question is, this is actually a question that someone had when we posted about speaking with you, is you are an incredibly accomplished journalist. How, I don't want to put you on the spot in any way, but how, like, do you have, are some of the things about the media in this movie based off your own frustrations trying to be that fact-based journalist in a time which more rewards punditry and clicks and celebritized, you know, nonsense?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, you know, my own experience as a journalist trying to essentially get fact into the discourse, a lot of that frustration is reflected in this movie. Same thing, but that I'm not unique to that. I mean, it's the same thing for climate scientists. It's the, you know, it's the same, and I think that you know, I think that obviously is baked into the movie. That's frankly, that's where the original idea for the movie, because again, the story for the movie is not just a comet is headed towards Earth. I mean, that's the oldest. I wasn't the first person to ever, you know, come up with that. That's the oldest story in the history of the planet, like the literal asteroid, you know, with the dinosaurs and the like. The story of the movie is how we in an advanced society can learn something of that gravity and then not have systems and structures in place to first make that revelation widely known and accepted, and then constructively act on those facts. And I feel like, frankly, that I'm one of many people who that has been definitional to my own work, which is I report things that lots of people in power don't want to be reported. And no matter, at a certain level, there's a feeling that no matter how big the story is, how big the horrifying crisis some of my reporting has revealed, it's very difficult to get it to what they call in the media world, to get it to land. I mean, the reporting that we did on Cuomo, for instance, on nursing homes and him getting immunity for the corporate owners of nursing homes as there was this horrible situation of COVID in nursing homes, to get them legal immunity. We broke that big pieces of that story. It took forever for that story to land. I mean, death after death after death over months to get that story to finally land. And it did land. It did land for not just because of us, but for various reasons. But the point is like, it shouldn't have been that difficult to get a story of that consequence to land. And in the middle of that story being reported, he was being touted by the same media system as a national hero who was saving everybody. I mean, it really did feel like that was my own most recent feeling of being like Kate DiBiase or Dr. Mindy in the movie, where you're like, listen, like thousands of people are literally dying. The corporate owners of the nursing homes don't have a legal deterrent to try to actually do whatever they can to fix things, because they know they don't have to fix things because there's not a threat that they're going to get sued into the ground. Right? Like you've taken away the deterrent, and to feel like, I mean, look, the story got out there. I mean, it really did. I mean, it got around at one level, but it's like, how is that story out there And then he's getting to go on CNN every night and being touted as like, people, I'm a Cuomo-sexual, and he's like the greatest. He's people saying, regular people turn on their TV and say, he's really an inspiration to me through this pandemic. He's really what I need. You're like, what is happening here? Like I honestly felt like that. Just even talking to you about it, I'm about to give my like Dr. Mindy rant, right? Like, like if we can't agree that that what was going on there was a problem, like what have we become?
Yes.
That's what it's a great, I mean, that network moment is really familiar and a great piece of like sort of cinema. And sort of where I laugh the most is when like that feeling that you were just recreating for yourself and thinking about that. I feel that almost every day, right? Like every day in the work that I do, all I want to be like is, what do you mean?
Yes.
They're killing people because they have a cartel to raise the price of insulin every fucking year. Sorry,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Right? And I just want to freak out at them. But then I'm like, but I have to exist in this system. So instead, I'm like, I'm going to get media training and learn how to like look into the camera and smile and be like, well, you see, these sociopaths are killing people for it's mind-boggling. But right, like,
and that part
that's
where
what
says,
I felt
one of the
seen.
cores of the movie.
I felt seen, David.
Yes, one of the cores in the movie, I think, is when she says, I mean, it's such, and she's so amazing. She's a great actress, and she delivers it so perfectly. Where she's like, "What if the destruction of the planet isn't supposed to be fun, right? Like, what if it's not supposed to be? This isn't supposed to be good news." Right. And then you see they flash to the essentially the New York Herald, which is like a stand-in for the New York Times and sort of elite media. And they're like, oh no, don't do that. Don't be serious. Like don't
deliver
be
bad
too
news. No one wants bad news. No one.
And it's not. And here's the thing.
News.
It's not just bad news. One of the things that I think I've been trying to kind of psychoanalyze why this movie has generated such a response. And I think part of what makes, I think, people uncomfortable is the movie clearly believes in something. It has a core soul. And I think one thing that you sense from, it's unspoken in our elite media and political debate. There's this idea that to believe in anything too passionately is to make one unserious. To make one unrealistic, to make one too emotional, to make one hysterical, right? And the thing is that seriously, like if you read the New York Times, read the Washington Post, read the Wall Street Journal, there's this underlying idea, unstated, that anybody who believes too passionately in anything cannot be fully taken completely seriously. They must be sort of eye-rolled, or at least patted on the head. And the thing is that unto itself is an ideology. Oh, nobody who believes in anything too passionately should be taken too seriously. And I think that's a problem. I mean, that I think part of what I take away from those scenes in the Daily Rip in the movie is, and you're sort of the elites being like, oh, don't Kate DiBiase, don't be too upset. Don't be too, you didn't do, when he says after she says the world's going to end, he says to Leo DiCaprio, he says, you did great, but the yelling lady didn't do so great. It's like, it sort of exudes the idea that to feel passionately, even about the literal end of the world, is like, oh, come on, you can't really take you fully seriously, even if you're factually, scientifically correct.
Well, and I think, every single word you're saying, thank you, because you just hit it on the head, something I feel like I've been trying to put into words my entire life. Look, during the French Revolution, we had this shift away from spiritual institutions to rational institutions and created this, hyper-rationalized humanism that was going to define public discourse for the next 200 years, which is obviously a very good thing. We like that we use our prefrontal cortex a lot. We like that we're, living in our heads a lot. But now we've reached this opposite extreme where instead of existing in the rational discourse, we're existing in a rationalization discourse. And the fact that we're not using our hearts anymore, which, like, look, we're emotional people for a reason. If you hear that we're all going to die, that's supposed to provoke an extremely emotional reaction, because that's a bad thing. And, it seems like in the mainstream media, there is this very snide attitude towards anything which provokes an emotional response.
That's right.
And
That's
disturbing.
right. It is disturbing. And I think that, listen, look, passion, emotion, it can get out of hand.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's January 7th, the day after the anniversary of the January 6th insurrection, riot, whatever you want to call it. I would argue that that's a situation where people's emotions and passions got wildly out of control, and that's not a good thing. That's a terrible thing. I have lots to say about where that came from. Obviously, I was horrified by it, like everybody, but I think we as a society, to digress for one sec, I think the media has not asked, it's not really interested in, and neither are the politicians, asking questions of where that comes from. It's treated as a moment in time that happened kind of magically out of nowhere. And if it was out of anywhere, it was just, Donald Trump was a jerk, and that's why this happened. Very few people want to ask why, what it is, what is it an anomaly, or is it a piece of a larger story? And again, it's not to justify it, not to rationalize it, but just to ask, what is the context for this? But my point, going back to emotion and feeling, I agree that emotion and feeling can get out of control. But I also think that scoffing at anybody with passion, emotion, and feeling, thinking that it's unserious, is deeply problematic. It's deeply elitist. And it's really kind of inhuman, because again, if we're all people, we all have passionate feelings. And I think if you can't feel passion and emotion and sadness and feelings of terror, and when you think about something like the climate crisis, that's a problem. And the media shouldn't be there to anesthetize us. The media shouldn't be there to make us to say, don't look up. We need a media that says, listen, this is uncomfortable, this is scary, but we have to take this seriously. We have to take all of these crises seriously. That is the role of the media. And some people have asked, is it a chicken or the egg game? Is the media giving us what we want, or and is it really, can you really blame the media for that? Is it really a problem with us? And my view is, yes, there's an interplay between what we supposedly want and what the media gives us. But I think it's a cop-out that we know from the advertising industry, from the media industry, or the modern media industry, that manufacturing desire is a big thing in media, that media institutions can create interest, can create what we think we as a society is important and is not important. Fox News literally does that all the time. When major events are happening and it's focused on something that to non-Fox viewers seems ridiculous, but the viewership of Fox wants that because Fox says this is important. And so for me, as somebody in journalism, I hope one of the takeaways for the media when this is watched by people in the media is that we have a responsibility to not just presume that people want garbage. We have a responsibility to take things that are uncomfortable and yet empirically, on an empirical basis, super important, like climate change, like the public health science. We have an obligation to not say, oh, those things don't rate. And by the way, the movie proves that the idea that climate doesn't rate. I mean, the movie is the biggest movie on the world's largest platform. That's over. Goodbye. Like the idea that climate doesn't rate, like just good night, right? Like that's done. But I do think what it says is you have to find ways to compellingly present the story of climate change. And there's a talent question. There's an imagination question, which is how do you cover climate? every day if you're a working reporter? How do you bake climate coverage into your coverage in a compelling way? And I think I don't think it's that hard, right? I mean, coverage of the economy is baked into day-to-day coverage.
Yep.
Right? Coverage of various things is baked into the day-to-day political coverage. You go to today, there'll be a White House press conference. They'll be asked about the jobs report. Will they be asked about the latest carbon emissions report? Probably not. This isn't that hard. It's just a matter of, hey, we actually have to do this. And hopefully the movie shakes people into waking up that it is possible. It's kind of like oh, you know what? The way we've been doing things doesn't have to be the way we keep doing things.
And David, I'm going to give you the last word here, but first I want to just point out that uncomfortableness, that realness, that not garbage, that telling the actual truth is actually, that's where the hope is as well. It's the opposite of hopeless. When you delve in, the propaganda is telling us that we have no power. The propaganda is telling us there's nothing we can do. So just don't look up. But the truth is that we have all of the power. Every ounce of power that exists resides in the people. And when we recognize that and work together, we could even stop the comet of climate change. We can build a future for all of us. And that's the deep hope I feel from us on this show right now that we talk about all the time. It's a belief in the future. Yes. That's what we have, and those billionaires don't, because they've collapsed it all onto themselves, just ego. And we believe in the future, and there's an immense amount of hope in that. So I want to do this plug for you, though, David, which is tell everyone how they can sign up for Daily Poster, which continues to deliver hard-hitting journalism day after day after day. Annoyingly, you just dropped a super important story like yesterday, and I'm like, I can't even talk about that with you because Don't Look Up just came out. So, David, where can people sign up and support your ongoing journalism?
Well, thank you. Thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. People can find our work at dailyposter.com. We do daily, day-to-day investigative accountability journalism. We listen, and I want to be clear here. You may not agree with every single thing that you read at the Daily Poster, in the sense of we go and we cover the things fearlessly, I think, that are people have passionate feelings of. We have a story today about vaccines and testing mandates and the like. And I know people feel passionately about these things. What we try to do, and I think successfully, we ground our reporting in the facts. We also do some commentary, but most of what we do is reporting grounded in facts. We are clear about what our principles are, but the reporting is fact-based. It is built on verifiable facts. That's why you'll see all of our stories have so many hyperlinks. So you don't have to believe us. You can go check to make sure that we're right. And we do that with the hope, granted, some days it feels kind of ridiculous, but with the hope, as I said before, that our reporting is our reporting grounded in fact. It may offend your political loyalties. Oh, you're saying this about Democrats. I like Democrats. But the hope is that the reporting gets judged on the merits. You can like Democrats, you can like Republicans, you can hate Democrats, you can hate Republicans. My hope is that our reporting is judged on the merits of the facts presented, and that more and more people take in journalism, take in media in a way where they accept and certainly verify, but accept verified facts. And one, don't demonize the people reporting the facts, actually appreciate that the facts are being put out there. And two, if you're mad at anybody about those facts, be mad at the people creating those facts. In other words, creating the realities that you're mad about. Don't be mad at the people for spotlighting and exposing those realities. And just one last thing. I mean, we experienced that, for instance, with the Cuomo thing. Andrew Cuomo is a great Democratic leader. Yeah, what you're exposing is maybe it's true, whatever, but like, you're getting in the way of a guy who is leading us. And it was, not to belabor it, but it was very frustrating. And then ultimately the facts finally win the day. But the point is that evaluate facts before you evaluate whether you will accept facts, because they might offend the party or the politician you are loyal to. That's the hope of our work.
Jocelyn, you want to sign us out?
I've just loved every minute of this conversation. Thank you so much, David, for everything you do and for giving me, and I think everyone watching, a whole lot to think about. Are we keeping involved in your journalism? Do you think you would return to Hollywood for more climate satire?
Well, I'm talking to a bunch of folks about what the next kinds of projects are. We did this big podcast series. I worked with Alex Gibney on this separate series called Meltdown, which was about how the financial crisis and the weak response to the financial crisis created the political conditions for the rise of Donald Trump and the movement behind him. It's a story that not a lot of people, certainly not a lot of liberals like to talk about, because again, it raises uncomfortable truths about what the Obama administration did in the aftermath of the financial crisis, how it used its mandate or didn't use its mandate. So I'm looking into, we may do some more podcasts, we may do some more movie stuff. I mean, it's honestly, it's been a super wild ride these last few months.
It's just getting started, David.
Yeah, I mean, we will see. I mean, it's been incredible. And again,
you don't have the #1 most watched movie on the largest platform in the world.
I mean, that's so way beyond my
I'm trying to just tell you.
I know.
It's not like, oh, now it's over. I'm on to the next one.
I was like, listen, the movie's gonna be good. It's like be a good movie. It's like, I'm proud of the movie. It'll get a decent response. Now it's like, I mean, it's so giant. It's really hard to wrap my head around how.
Hold on.
I know, exactly. So thank you both for your work, and thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
And we will continue to use it to raise it up and to build that activism and that power to remind people that we have the power to build the future that we want.
Absolutely.
We don't have to accept what's given to us.
No.
David, thank you so much for joining us on Solidarity Live.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you so much.